We're live.
All right, Chair, we are now live on YouTube and we're happy to start the meeting.
Okay, fantastic. Apologies for the very slight delay in the start of the meeting. Right, welcome everyone to this meeting of Scrutiny Panel B. This meeting's been streamed live on YouTube, as we've just mentioned. So good evening to any interested viewers that may be viewing this meeting. Can I please ask for patience should the meeting move at a slightly slower pace? This will allow us to work through the agenda and deal with any technical issues that may arise. To ensure the audio for this meeting is as clear as possible, we'll be muting all microphones as a default setting to keep the background noise to a minimum. When wishing to speak, I would ask attendees if they could raise their hand and wait to be invited to be speak by myself. Your microphone would then be unmuted. You'll be able to speak. Committee members are asked to vote by raising their hands as indicated if they are in favour, against, or wishing to abstain from the motion. I should get my glasses back on. Right, okay. So agenda item 1 is to receive any apologies. Can I ask if there have been any apologies submitted?
Yes, Chairman, we've got apologies from Councillor Melanie Darrington.
Okay. So that is that. So I'm just going to bring the agenda elsewhere as well. Right, and so we're on to agenda item 2. This item is to consider any declarations of disclosable pecuniary or personal interest or non-disclosable pecuniary or other interests. Are there any declarations by any of the members? No, I'm seeing shaking heads by everybody. Okay, so that's a no interests. On to agenda item 3. This item is to approve as a correct record of the minutes of the last meeting held on the 12th of November 2020. Is there anybody who wishes to make any comments with the accuracy, in comment to the accuracy of those minutes? No, in which case could I ask for a mover, please? I've got Councillor Dave Walters is looking to do that. And could I have a seconder, Councillor Grounds? Yep, Councillor Grounds for seconding that. Okay, and therefore could we have a show of hands, all of those in favour of approving the minutes? Okay, that seems to be unanimous. Okay, and then finally on to agenda item 4, which is the main point. This is the review of the climate change and the Council's ongoing commitment towards climate change mitigation, which is in the report, pages 18 to, sorry, not 18, from 11 to 18. So we've got 3, so I'm just going to try and get to the recommendations myself on this. So we've got 3 recommendations that we're looking at tonight. So note of information contained in this actual report, discussion how the Centre of Governance and Scrutiny Guidance can be best applied during this review, and to consider the future working group meeting dates, focus themes, and the rest of it. So again, trying to lay out where we're going to be carrying this on to from now. Obviously, we started this last November, where we set the initial terms of reference. We actually had an informal meet last week, is it? I've got time's flying so fast I can't remember even what day of the week it is. We had with us there Ian Bailey, the Assistant Director for Assets and Investments, and Darren Wardell from the Strategic Asset Manager. They're both in attendance to us this evening. So just a quick one to explain who Ian and Darren are, and again, just to sort of, again, if I get this wrong, guys, please just jump in and correct me. So Ian is sort of in charge of, you know, a lot of our housing stock in areas like that, there, car parks and the rest of it. Sorry, I'm trying to find my notes from the last meeting. But there's also obviously got a hat on with this in regards to looking at effectively the efficiency of our stock and what we can do against sort of the climate change on that. He is actually leading an internal climate change collaboration group. and obviously Darren, as part of the strategic asset management, again, is obviously looking at our buildings and the rest of it from that. So is that a good summation, Darren and Ian, of our thing? Ian, do you want to add to that?
Thanks, Cash. I think that's a pretty good summary. Yes, just to add, we are probably leading on bringing the collaboratively, each council and department, sorry, each section and department do many things towards climate change. So we're trying to, through the working group, bringing the collaborations together. So we're working together, not against each other, and helping each other out. Okay,
that's good. We've also got Daniel with us tonight as well, who's going to sort of, I think from a portfolio point of view, going to lead sort of the political side from the cabinet on this. We've had a bit of a discussion on that. So again, that's just again why Daniel is particularly here. We had a deep discussion. It's close to his heart, climate change and the environment. So again, he's greatly invested in this. Right. So Shane, do you want to now take over and stop me talking?
I will. I'll do everyone the favour. No, I'm just kidding. Good to see you all tonight. I hope you're all well, keeping safe. If you notice in the report, I've put some information regarding some guidance that's recently been released by the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, formerly known as Centre for Public Scrutiny. So they're, something that me and Mike look to a lot for guidance when we're carrying out reviews. And we've got lucky this time because in September of last year, they released a big publication about scrutinising climate change and mitigation efforts at a local level. So it's something that is useful for me and Mike to look at. And, I've put some brief information in the report, some of the key points from that guidance. There is a full document available. I think if members are interested in that, let me know and I can send that on. But I understand that not everyone wants to read 37 pages on how to scrutinise climate change. But if I could just bring to members' attention some of the key points within that document and how I think it can help us carry out this review and really focus in, because I think something that's clear from the first meeting and something that was clear from the working group is this is such a broad topic, there's such potential sort of depth and breadth to it that we really need to focus in to make sure we are spending our time wisely and actually providing some value to the decision making and how we mitigate climate change. So basically the format of the guidance is 10 questions. So 10 key questions that we can consider, that we can use, that we can ask to frame the review, to get some of the key information we may need. And in the report, I've put the 10 questions in. I think a couple of them may not be completely relevant to us because they're talking about adult social care and education. Obviously, that's more of a county level thing. But I think, most of the questions are relevant to us. And, within the full document, for every question, there's 10 supplementary questions, you can keep going through. So I think it's really useful for us to consider those questions and, and as I say, help us frame the review and work towards putting these questions towards the decision makers of the council to help us progress. So I'm not going to read out the questions, but they are in the report and they're interesting to know. And I think one interesting thing that the guidance does do is offer provide some perspective on how sort of COVID-19 has impacted this. And I know, the impact of the pandemic is felt through everything really, but when we talk about climate change and the plans that the council has made in years gone by to mitigate climate change and how it's going to work to do that, potentially a lot of this has got to change now that we're under the pandemic, and potentially we're not going to see as much growth as we had hoped, or certain plans aren't going to be able to be brought to fruition because we've got to focus on other things. So that's an interesting perspective that's highlighted in the guidance. And I think some of the key points that have come from that and come from some seminars at the LGA is what works well when scrutinising climate action and mitigation is, one, prioritising, so making sure we're focusing on specific work streams that we can influence. There's no point wasting our time with things that we can't influence. We'd love to be able to look at everything and change everything, but we've got to work within the scope of our panel and within the remit of the panel as well. So again, we need to select themes based on what the council can actually do and influence. So, that can be things such as organisationally what we can change, how we work with businesses in Ashfield to influence their mitigation efforts and the like. I think another thing that I can pick up from the guidance is that we really need to gather as much evidence as possible, obviously that is pertinent to the review and to the themes that we're exploring, but gather as much evidence as possible. And, you know, this is part of it, doing the working group last week, having Ian and Darren along and question them, and other officers within the council as well, that we can invite along and get involved in future meetings. And that's the next point, you know, involving senior officers, getting their buy-in as well. So we can help them as they are, no doubt look for feedback from the public, from businesses, and also from members, which Scrutiny can be a really positive vehicle to do that. And again, talking about engagement, public engagement, something that we always look to do through Scrutiny. It's often harder to do. It's easier said than done, getting the public engaged, but I think one way we can do that is through, and I know Councillor Chapman mentioned it at a previous meeting, is working with schools. You know, it's something that's on the agenda for schools in the area, and I think maybe that's somewhere we can really engage the public and get some different views to feed into our decision makers. And finally, I think, you know, we say this every review, but it's developing realistic recommendations. You know, there's only so much we can do, but I do believe there is a lot of positive value that we can provide the council, we can provide decision makers. And I think, you know, with that mindset, as long as we approach this review with that mindset, should I say, I think we'll lead some good positive work. So that's enough from me now, I think, Chairman, on the guidance. So I'll pass it back to you unless there's any specific questions on that.
No one seems to be indicating, and I hope I've unmuted again. Sorry, my dog seems to be kicking off tonight, so occasionally you might hear a bit of a barking in the background. He seems to have found his voice. Right, yeah, good overview. Thank you from that, Shane. Also, again, just to make sure those 10 questions start on page 13 of the report that Shane's provided us, if you want to be sort of looking at those. Right. Ian, is it possible you could give us a very, very brief overview? Obviously, we had a great discussion at the working group, which sort of kind of went over the amount of time that we had available. So again, obviously, just give us a brief overview, and then we'll sort of dig into some further sort of stuff. Myself and Dave Waters, who were at the meeting, can obviously maybe elaborate on a bit of stuff that we found interesting from that. I can put it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. How long have I got? I'll try and condense it.
Try and keep it short. I must admit, every time I've had like service directors and the rest of it in the past, and I've said keep it short, it's always gone on maybe longer than we'd anticipate. So just give us a brief overview, because obviously what you are looking at a huge area. So just give us a kind of a gist of what the council's been able to achieve so far.
Sure. The key headings are fundamentally the council is clearly aware and very proactive to do something about climate change. It's very real. So the first thing is all decisions now all officers need to consider climate change as part of any decision-making process. Our officers' decision records, executive decision records, all require comments regarding the environment and the impact of any decisions on that, which is a good start. The climate change working group's been going about a year now, similar time since you set up yourselves, and that involves all aspects of the council delivery. So we have lead officers, senior officers from the likes of planning, waste environment, strategic housing, major projects, ourselves, energy, finance, to cover all the facets of climate change in every way we can impact it and help it as a council. We also work with wider with the likes of the Local Enterprise Partnership, Midlands Energy Hub, Local Authority Energy Partnership, Business Energy and Industry Strategy, Association of Public Service Excellence. So all these people, we're working with every Nottinghamshire council and also Derby councils to work collaboratively to lobby, to bring ideas together and help each other out. So it goes way beyond the council that officers are doing. There are subgroups, obviously, like some planning, where the lead planning officers from each council work together to look at their particular specialisms. So this is all going on behind the scenes. The fundamental thing we're doing at the moment is we are close to completing with Nottingham City Council a commission to upgrade our carbon footprint to see what the council's carbon baseline is, which will set as a baseline to then improve upon going forward. It will also tell us where we were 5 years ago to see how far we've come in the last 5 years, and that will be a new baseline. We need something to work from, and that is the starting point. as part of that commission, it will also generate an updated strategy and a draft action plan, which will then put to our directors and through members to then polarise that draft plan into what we want to do as a council, including whether members and the senior management want to involve key stakeholders at this point or do a little bit further down the line. But obviously that will come because we need to include everybody, all key stakeholders within the district. As part of the commission, we're doing various, looking at the existing non-domestic stock to see what we can do. So that will include looking at all our buildings. Can we put solar panels on it? Does the business case stack up? Can we do other measures such as insulation measures? Can we improve the heat efficiency of all these factors? So that is part of the commission with Nottingham City Council, and we nearly concluded that now. So we've got a good idea of what we want to achieve, which again will bring through the respective channels for approvals to reduce our carbon footprint. Looking at the bigger picture, the council's emissions is roughly about 3% of the district's emissions. So whereas our starting point, as Shane said, we will endeavour and we will look to reduce our carbon footprint for what we can control. Roughly 97% of the district's emissions is outside of the council activity. So this is where it needs to go wider with the likes of new warm home standard, planning teeth, where we can actually enforce things to carrot and stick approach to ensure that everybody and every individual in the community and district does their part towards achieving climate change mitigation. If we're not together, we all don't do it, then it's not going to happen. So that's part of it. As part of the updated strategy, we will look at what we need to do as a council, as an entirety, looking at the entire district emissions to see what we can potentially influence in terms of that. So there's something called the scatter tool. So every district up and down the country has been made aware of their carbon emissions, and then there's a new tool come out which we can then look at how much it's going to cost to achieve what we want to achieve, which puts the realism on the aspirations. So it's a balance between best banks for bucks, which is a very useful tool which we will develop going forward. In terms of communications, we've done a lot of communications. The new Green Homes Grant is on the website to point people toward it. We've carried out an employee survey for ideas for mitigating climate change. We've just done a recent commuting survey to establish our indirect emissions on that. In terms of energy demand, we've renewed all the council's energy frameworks in the last year. We have gone on to clean green electricity in the last few months for the main sites that the council uses. And we will transition to all electricity being green from April when we transition to the non-half hourly, the smaller sites framework in April. Then, as I mentioned, we're developing huge amounts of collaborative measures with NotCC to reduce the domestic asset carbon emissions. As part of that, we'll include things like can we review the leases for buildings such that people pay for what they use, so there's no misuse of energy. In terms of the environment, there is other sections we're working on environmental charter. There's a green business scheme which will be relaunched next year or this year to encourage local businesses to adopt green credentials. Also, we planted 1,000 trees this year. There'll be many more coming in the years to come. We're looking at fleet. As part of the review of the non-domestic assets will be a fleet review, looking at, for example, the depots to whether we can produce maximise solar panel usage to then charge vehicles which are then electric, subject to the business case stacking up. In terms of town centres, we are, I think there's a bid put in for £2.58 million for walking and cycling as part of the town's fund bids to invest in walking and cycling infrastructure. The air quality regulations are currently being amended, as we understand, which will make things better and reduce things like emissions from, things like wood and fossil fuels. In terms of waste and recycling, the department which is responsible for waste and recycling is currently working towards the LGA 2023 targets, which covers multiple facets of it, which includes all plastics being recyclable, reusable or compostable by 2025. eliminating food waste to landfill by 2030. This is part of that. I think they're working toward getting this up and running by 2023. There are various other facets in there, including eliminating avoidable plastic waste, which I think is along the lines of increased segregation of waste along those lines. On the housing side, we're fortunate that of the council's housing stock, I think we have less than 10% with a middle D or lower EPC rating, which is really, really good. We're looking to improve that further. Yesterday it was announced we've got some wonderful funding to improve the EPC ratings in social housing stock and private sector, which is fully funded for that, which will improve upon that. The housing strategy is looking at targeting the most vulnerable to see how we can improve their quality of life and target those where the EPC ratings are lowest and where they're most vulnerable as a consequence of climate change and the likes of fuel poverty. To put it into context of our council's housing stock, we need potentially £300 million to make them carbon zero. So this is where the aspirations versus what is affordable comes in. So we are reliant heavily on government funding to enable us to achieve some of these things. But as I say, fundamentally 90% of the housing stock is a middle D or above for EPC, which is really, really good. We constantly improve upon that year upon year. In terms of innovation and improving, we are ongoing reviewing the assets of the council's non-domestic stock. So if it's not making any money or not doing any benefit, and it's a burden on carbon emissions, then we will stop doing that. And we're also waiting this week we put a bid in for public sector decarbonisation funding, which is solar panels to some of our larger buildings, which hopefully, if we're successful, will achieve and assist with that. In terms of procurement, one thing which we will look to encourage is, and is mentioned in the previous minutes, is to ensure that climate change and carbon reduction is very high on priorities when we select and supply subcontractors, contractors for the council's activities. As part of our major works contract, which is worth about £30 million, we have climate change questions at shortlisting stage and score them on their climate change credentials at shortlisting as well as the price. So we take it into consideration, but this needs to be stretched out and probably incorporated within our contract procedure rules to ensure that everybody, every supplier is doing their part for the council. And then almost nearly there, financial sustainability, we also work with finance. So finance have various options to invest in green investments, so green bonds, partnerships, that sort of thing, to invest in green technology, not just in Ashfield and wider from Ashfield, to see whether we can benefit the nation and the globe through our investments in green technology, which will also link into upskilling, which is hopefully an indirect benefit of these investments. And the last thing is obviously with COVID, which has been terrible this year, agile working is something the council has massively introduced, which will have drastically reduced the amount of commuting to work. It's dramatically reduced the amount of paper used and printed out. So this is all going in the right direction. So the agile working will, as I say, reduce massively people's travelling to and from and the carbon emissions associated with it, and the paper usage and the likes of that. The last thing I'll say is we are currently doing a flood protection scheme in Notts County Council at the moment to mitigate against potential flood works at the moment. So that is a very whistle-stop tour, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. That was fantastic. That was very good. And again, you've managed to get into 10 minutes. I think sort of took well over an hour last time. So thank you very much for that. Okay, Senior Dave, I'm going to bring you in after Mike. He has actually indicated to me that he wishes to talk. So Mike, if you'd like to come in, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ian. I think obviously the discussions behind the scenes, Ian is looking into climate change as part of a wider group and obviously taking a lead on that. I think What I wanted to say, Chair, from a public point of view, it's interesting that we have received a question from the public with regards to the council's fleets, which is happening. The meeting's taking place next week, so it's obviously something that is on the public agenda as well. And I know from the papers that Shane pulled together for the actual meeting, part of the process of initiating longer term change is to raise public awareness, lead by example, and look at some of the things that we as a council can do and assist in educating and assisting local businesses in making those small step changes that actually lead up to those wider reductions in emissions. So, and I know Ian touched on the looking at the fleet and the use of fossil fuels in the fleet, and obviously that's posed as a question from the public for next Thursday's council meeting. I think as a scrutiny panel, there's the issue is so wide that it's really important for this panel to narrow down on some of those areas that it feels that it can make a contribution to, that it can get some evidence-based recommendations and some tangible results, and actually achievable results. And I think Shane touched upon this in his opening speech. There's the current pandemic has placed massive pressures on some of our local businesses, and some of those may clash with some of the initiatives that inevitably cost money to push forward, but are still extremely important. So there's a real struggle out there at the moment in terms of pushing a message, but also sustaining actually some of our economic activity within the district. So I think from a panel point of view, what we need to focus in on is actually, you know, some key areas that we as a council feel are the achievable areas that we can actually push for, publicise, that we can make some recommendations. I know we've got the portfolio holder here, Dan Williamson, so thank you for coming along, Dan, and I know this is a subject that is close to his heart. And it's about focusing. Shane had suggested and put in the report about setting the dates for the future working groups, and what we're trying to achieve is do some work behind the scenes as part of these working groups and focus down on some of the key themes. Those key themes will be set by you as a panel member, those areas that you feel are important to look into, and more importantly, achievable, those areas that we can actually instigate change through recommendations to Cabinet. I know Shane wanted to come back in at this stage, or was it later on, Shane? Did you?
I know, Councillor Walters, did you want to come into the discussion? Because I just had a question to put to Councillor Williamson while he's here, put him on the spot a little bit, but I can wait till later and we'll let him simmer for a few more minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let me bring Councillor Walters in, and I'll come back to you, Shane. So if you've finished off there, Mike, then please.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just my usual thing. Ian, I didn't say this at the last informal meeting, but thank you very much. Excellent reports, and again today. But to me, when we're talking about prioritising improvements or what we can improve, I think one of the key factors is the results of this energy audit that you mentioned at our informal meeting. You mentioned the Midlands Energy Hub, and also the Rushcliffe Group, you know, we're collaborating with. When's the chance of seeing the results of these audit results? I mean, then we could have a benchmark where we're starting from. Then we could set priorities of what we can achieve, etc., etc. Is there any news on that, please?
Yes, by all means. We had a meeting with Nottingham City Council yesterday, the day before, lose track of time, and the current target is the end of April, subject to other thing for having the report finalised. So at the moment we have, the idea is that all the individual actions, the energy audits, the recommendations, looking at business cases for solar panels on our bigger buildings and lecture centres, for example, that will all be wrapped into the final report. So the idea is end of April is Nottingham City's current target. I think they can achieve that, and I think they will achieve that. And so that will polarise it into a draft action plan. So we've got the baseline data, and then from that we'll draft an action plan, which will then come through yourselves, members, and the senior management. And that's our starting point. I think the other good thing about it will be we'll be able to, because of the data we provide them with, we've gone back 5 years, so not 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we've had to collate a huge amount of data for Nottingham City to enable them to do this exercise, and particularly on what we call the Scope 3 emissions, which is the more indirect emissions, which is things like the purchased goods. So whatever the council buys, it has a carbon footprint. And it has things like if it's delivered to the door, then it has a carbon footprint of somebody transporting that good to the council. It covers, as I mentioned, commuting to and from work. It covers the council's investments, because everything the council invests in commercially has a carbon footprint. So these will all be wrapped into this new baseline. And then the idea is that certainly what we can tackle is our own activities directly and a lot of the indirect ones. So starting point is we need to lead by example as a council. So we need to show everybody else that we can deliver in terms of reducing our own carbon footprint of all of our activities, not just the buildings, but the activities that we carry out from day to day.
Okay. I was going to ask Dave if you wanted to come back again, but that sounds like you've indicated. Okay, Shane, do you want to jump back in again now? You had a question, I think, Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to read. I was looking through the guidance again. I just thought I'd put one of the questions. It's the second question, and in your role, Councillor Williamson, as a cabinet member, portfolio holder, and obviously as part of the council's leadership, it's quite a broad question in the guidance, but it's simply how does the council's leadership champion and direct action on climate change? So I think as a panel, we're interested in knowing, what the decision makers, how cabinet are approaching this.
Yeah. Is that exactly?
I don't want to say too more. I'll save up a bit.
No, well, that's fine. Thank you for putting me on the spot with that. I think there's quite a few ways in which, obviously, we want to champion and really advance what our council does in terms of climate change. Now, obviously, all of you will know as councillors some time ago, we did pass recognition of the climate emergency, and we've done small parts day to day, I think, in a lot of areas throughout the council, and trying to encourage a more sustainable growth, a better environment for people. I think if you look at some of the actions that we've taken recently, I think they show quite a clear dedication to what we want to do, and saving the planet and doing what we can for it. We've recently at Cabinet this week, we approved a brand new environmental charter which sits and dictates around the environment within Ashfield. We've, as Ian said earlier, I believe it was, we've just found out last night that we've secured, I believe it's around about £1 million to put onto reinvigorating our council stock and making sure that they are all EPC rated level C as a minimum. And obviously in ways that we champion it, this is why I'm here now, Shane. This is why I've been put into this role, and it's been given as part of my remit. As climate change is something that is very close to my heart. I was told by a rather canny man a long time ago that in politics you should really pick, if you're going to have one big issue, you should pick one that is important to you and that you believe you can do some change in, which is why I'm sat here now. This panel is here, so I am here to champion it on behalf of leadership. Everybody is committed. We've had the mention of 1,000 trees being planted a year. We intend to absolutely smash that every single year. So sorry if I've gone a bit scattergun here. It's obviously, in case you can't tell, it is something I am quite passionate about, and I think we've done a lot of things in smaller ways that have shown that we do have that commitment to acknowledging this problem and really turning things around. But as for directing it all together, tying it all up and making sure that we have something that is really fantastic and that we can show and be proud of, well, that's why we're here at this scrutiny panel now. I mean, I'm happy to take questions on anything, or if anybody wants to ask about anything at all, but I think I've covered most of the bases there.
Yeah, I'll just thank you for that response, Councillor Williamson. I think, you know, it's really exciting, and for us as a panel to hear that the decision makers are on a similar wavelength, and potentially that, you know, the things that we're going to be discussing and putting before cabinet will be received well. And I think as well, you know, I asked you that question as council's leadership. Obviously, there's a different side to the council's leadership, and myself and Mike will be working with CLT as well to, you know, ask them the similar questions and get their feedback, because I think as important as it is to have the, you know, the political buy-in, it's just as much organisational and from our senior officers as well. So, you know, just for the panel's information, that's something that we'll be doing, and we'll be, you know, harassing the directors and asking them at CLT, can you tell us, you know, the same question. So thank you for that response, Councillor Williamson.
That's absolutely not a problem.
Okay. Right. Just before I bring Dave Walters back in, who's indicating that he wanted to come in. Just a quick reminder, obviously page 8 and 9 is where we had sort of our climate change sort of objectives in terms of reference that we set out from the previous meeting. If you just want to go back to, obviously that's where we sort of decided that we were going to sort of put our limits and, you know, where we're trying to go with this, just as a bit of a reminder on that. Okay, Councillor Walters, I believe you wish to come back in again.
Yeah, it's just a short observation to Daniel. Maybe line the procedures up a bit up. Has he been in touch with President Biden yet about the Paris Treaty and Agreement? Has he got an invite or anything like that? That's it. Thank you.
I'm just bringing him into the meeting now, Councillor Walters.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Excellent job.
I've got him on the other line, Dave. I'll let you know as soon as he gets back to me. I think he's just busy whipping Trump at the minute.
Ooh, get you, mate. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, again, it's interesting. We sort of make a little bit of a joke about that, but one of the original climate meetings that was held actually in, I think it was Rio de Janeiro, way back when. I'm not even too sure if Daniel was alive. No, you weren't. Okay, my mum was at that. I think I've mentioned this before. She worked for the Leicester City Council, so it's not unprecedented for local councils to get, you know, a key into that level. So perhaps we should start thinking, you know, that big. Perhaps we should get Boris in, or somebody from the cabinet. I'm sure we've got a contact who can make that happen. Right, so let's actually sort of start digging into this. I mean, one of the things I would like to bring to, I think we're actually seem to be doing at the moment quite a good job between Darren and Ian on this, of already looking at effectively, you know, carbon side of this sort of stuff. That's what I particularly noted from the working group. You know, we've done a lot of stuff at looking at reducing, you know, things like the voltaic panels, our carbon use, obviously through the Nottingham City Council and the scatter tools and things like that. But obviously, as Ian pointed out in this, I mean, one is we're only 3% of Ashfield. So even if we completely, you know, get rid of any form of carbon usage, that's only 3% for Ashfield. And obviously, we need to be doing more than that. The other thing is we did have this, and I believe it is Andy Bell who's leading this, who's obviously not with us tonight. But it's obviously again something you touched on, you know, again about the all plastics being recyclable, and if I've got it right, no food waste to landfill and the rest of it. I mean, to me, this could be potentially one of the bigger areas that we start picking up on, because I think from my view of this, Ian, you're doing a very good job already on leading that side. And if that's already happening, I don't see there's much point as interfering too much with that. You know, it's working. Daniel from the portfolio side can probably work with you and sort of get that sort of thing going out. Again, there's something mentioned, you know, things like trees. I brought this up at the last meeting. Although, you know, really want to sort of, again, this is a matter close to my heart, has been for quite a lot of my life. I'm somewhat skeptical about this tree planting business, and there's, you know, schemes like this and the rest of it that I think perhaps we need to get a better handle on. And again, because I've not had a chance to properly read through that document that Shane's been talking about, how much that sort of calls into it. I mean, Shane, you've read that. Have you read the full document yet? That 32-page document, or have you just sort of grabbed the extract out?
I've read it, but I have slept since then as well. But are you talking about, you know, if in the guidance they're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, how far does it sort of stretch on that? Again, does that one talk about carbon mainly, or does it stretch outside of that area?
No, it does stretch outside of that. I think it's, you know, it's aimed at a very local level, and I think things like the tree planting initiatives, I know we discussed it in November. I think it's easy to you know, almost disregard the importance of that. But if we look at it a bit of a broader perspective, in you know, that engaging with the public as well, I'm sure those initiatives in its.
Oh, we seem to have lost Shane.
I think Shane's maybe experienced some Wi-Fi issues, Chair.
Right.
Seems to be
okay. While Shane there does that, it's a very flattering photo that you're left with. Ian was indicating to come in, so if you'd like to come in.
Councillor, I think just in terms of the tree planting, I think at the moment there is no true answer from anywhere yet on the carbon capture. Tree planting will assist with carbon capture, but it will not do a huge job. I think everybody's waiting for the science to catch up, and there are new approaches to carbon capture, but at the moment is that realistically there is huge amounts of carbon still being emitted everywhere, and the carbon capture at the moment will touch a fraction of it. So in terms of being truly net zero or absolute zero, this is something which there isn't, as far as I'm aware, no answer anywhere yet. But obviously anything we can do is, you know, and by setting examples will help toward it. But I think to get to true net zero, absolute zero is not feasible.
Yeah, and again, you know, something that you did bring up back both on your summary and in the working group was obviously, you know, we've got to look for the bang for our buck out of this. And therefore, you know, again, it's like, how much have we got to do, you know, with the tree planting to actually make it anything more than just a token? You know, and that's the sort of thing I don't see there's much point as either the council or this committee recommending anything that's just going to be token. It's a waste of, you know, resources and money that could be better pushed to something that's actually going to make a proper impact. So, I mean, at the moment, there's two things that I would find interesting. One, what can we do about the other 97%? You know, and as you say, businesses at the moment are suffering. You know, and this is a thing, but is this a time that we can rebuild a greener and cleaner way? You know, is this an opportunity to do that? You know, bring a phoenix out of the ashes. And also, again, to me at the moment, I mean, personally, I'm looking at, you know, what can we do more on the other areas, particularly the waste and recycling? Because again, it's knowing how much that is. Because again, you know, I read a bit. Unfortunately, I could probably get far too much of my information from more popular sites like YouTube and the rest of it. But hopefully I'm picking the right people to be looking at and looking at the data that they're then saying, this is what I'm basing my view on. So, you know, it's that area that I'm looking to sort of maybe sort of get us going into that. Yeah, and I'll let you back in. And again, also, one of the things I've noted that a lot of the work that we're currently included, you know, we've got Rushcliffe, we've got Nottingham City Council, we've got APSI, the LEP, the Midlands Energy Hub. These are all public bodies. I'm wondering if there's somebody outside of the, you know, the council and government framework that actually could give us another view on stuff with this, you know, and reaching out. Those are my sort of two sort of points, I think, really on this. Unless any of the councillors come in, I'll let Ian come back into. Okay, Trevor, as long as it's related to what I've just said, so I can not overload Ian, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh. Is that it?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Basically, I've been listening to all what you've said, and I've been relating that to what I said in the first instance, you know, in the last meeting. And that is, I firmly believe, especially for me, who has got this view, that we've got to get certain amount of things that we know we can do, and we've got to put that to the forefront so that we don't get bogged down. Because as everybody said, quite rightly said, throughout this piece here, and I'm very pleased to hear about that, and that is that it's such a wide area that you could end up by not really being able to put anything forward, especially for people like me that's fresh in on this. It's the first time I've ever been on anything like this. So I'm finding it very, very interesting indeed. But what I'm saying is, let's have a little bit of it from there and stick with that till we've got it tied down, rather than flicking about all over. That's the impression I got. And that's the only advice I would say from someone that knows nothing about this. But I would suggest that I could understand it better if we were saying, like you said, waste removal. That's going to be one of our things. Then something else and something else. And like I say, we need people or officers that can actually organise and think in them terms. That's the only thing I can say.
I understand, Trevor. So yeah, it's basically getting something we can get a result out of and prioritise that again. Okay. Yep.
Sounds good when you put it forward.
Sounds a good point. Ian, do you want to come back in?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just in terms of the bigger picture is, as part of the, for example, I think 2 weeks ago, the Nottinghamshire councils met with Bays regarding the Green Homes Grant Phase 2, which it was a kind of a feedback session to Bays to explain that the timeframes were too tight, it couldn't be delivered, and with the tight timeframes, it gives peaks and troughs in terms of demand, which is no good for local businesses. So part of that action is with the lead officers group at Rushcliffe, is taking the bigger picture and working collaboratively to try and have a bigger say, to say we need to be able to deliver these, we need to have a longer time frame such that we can between us decide who's being done when, such as a constant demand which will enable the upskilling and the local businesses to develop and stay in business, instead of the constant funding comes in, it's gone, it comes in, it's gone. So this is part of the bigger picture we're looking to achieve. Just further to Councillor Locke's comment is, I think within the council, I know we've covered a lot of bases, but each department naturally, as part of their day job, does their own specialism and will be working towards carbon reductions. And so obviously there are multiple things, and as we said earlier, Councillor Chapman is the best bangs for the bucks. So obviously, if anybody wants to know any more about the particular specialisms and what it can achieve and can't achieve, then we're happy to discuss that further, or with that particular specialist, to then polarise, and that will come out, I think, of the action plan to decide is, given what is doable, what's the scatter tool will tell us what will be the impact as a district on carbon emissions versus the cost of doing that. I think there are 32 subcategories, so that is a very, very good tool to look beyond the council to the district as a whole to reduce those emissions. And I think going back to your original point is the communications is a massive, massive thing. If we can, through the carrot and maybe a stick through legislation, to upskill and acknowledge everybody, individuals, ourselves and businesses, to know how to best reduce their carbon emissions and work toward it, then if there are 55,000 houses, for example, in Ashfield, if 20% of those do something, that would probably be cumulatively more than we can do to our stock as a council. So these are the things which probably will give us the best bangs cumulatively, is getting the information out there and getting the key stakeholders on board and just getting everybody to take their own responsibility for their own carbon emissions.
Okay, thank you for that, Ian. And just before I bring Councillor Rostenson, Shane, obviously you got cut off mid-flow. Is there anything you wanted to add up further?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I don't know what happened. I don't know where I got cut off, but I say where Fox, Netflix.
Oh dear, Shane. I think probably not have your video on. I think that's possibly overloading whatever you've got. We don't need to see your pretty face. It's all right. You're too young for the rest of us anyway.
I don't. It's all freezing on me. Let me restart quickly and I'll rejoin.
Okay. Okay, right. Let's bring Phil Rostenson, please, then.
Thank you, Chair. And Shane looks like he's got a filter on. He looks ever so smooth and fresh faced, isn't he, in there?
Yeah.
I just on your point on recycling, just following a meeting we had at the Joint Waste Management Committee last week, it might be worth just putting our plans for recycling just on the back burner until around March, because I know that's when government are going to be looking at reviewing the resource and waste strategy. That's when they're making the key decisions on whether they make food waste collection mandatory, if they're going to make free garden waste collection, and looking at anaerobic digestion, all that kind of thing. So it's definitely going to be somewhere we could work really well on, but it might just be worth until March putting it on the back burner before making any decisions to see what government come up with.
Okay, I mean, just obviously using your influence there. So if they're going to start making things mandatory, will there be any help on funding on the transition to that?
Yeah, that's what they said. That's been the biggest problem. When they put the consultation out, they said, yeah, we're on free food waste collection, free this, free that, the other, and that's what all the districts and boroughs and all the authorities have been saying. We'll happily do it if you can provide funding. So they're saying they want to do it, and if they want to do it, then they're going to have to cough up and give us some money. So hopefully by March they'll have worked out where this money's coming from and if it is going to be a goer.
Right. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting. If we can sort of do on that. I mean, again, to me, it's always, I don't care what the central government are doing. If it's a good idea, we should be doing it anyway. But obviously, again, it comes down to the finances. So yeah, that's fantastic. Again, it's brilliant to have you on that, where you've got these insights that maybe, we're not getting into. The only thing I want to quickly sort of talk about is you seem to be in a bunker there. I noticed you've got, the time zones of like New York, London, and, Paris behind you on the wall there. Is there something else that that we don't?
None of the clocks work. No, they're just for show. Yeah, don't look at any of the times. None of them tick. None of them change.
Right. Okay. Well, that is very interesting to note that actually we could have a decision in March for that. So that might be one for us to start scheduling to look at that actually after March, whenever the next one comes up with a working group or something like that. That'll be fantastic. So I'm going to just mark that down as a working group topic in my notes. Right. So in which case we've got that, I suppose in certain ways, like cuts that conversation quite short for us tonight, because obviously that wasn't one of the things I wanted to look at on that. So is there anybody else who wants to start bringing anything forward? Because obviously the only other topic that I've mentioned on this is actually other outside bodies that can maybe start advising, and I think this committee, not the council at the moment, so we have a better idea. Obviously, unfortunately, I just put a bit of a load on Mike and Shane to find somebody who could do that, though I possibly have a name already that I've previously mentioned.
Yeah, can I just make mention, Shane's having real trouble getting back in.
Okay.
It's joining, so he's watching on YouTube. If he's going to bring anything in, he's going to come through me.
Okay.
So every time he comes back in, everything freezes and he can't hear anyone. So just to let you know, he is still with us in spirit.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I've actually got the stream up myself, and I've noticed we've got an extra body watching now. So yeah. Okay. So right. I mean, that's the sort of thing at the moment. I suppose it's either almost questions starting to go to Daniel, or we start talking about, outside bodies and the rest of it, and what we'd like from that at the moment. Let's have it. Everybody, I'm timeout on this iPad, way too short.
I mean, what we could do, Chair, through you, is that obviously from a working group point of view, and obviously the work that we're doing behind the background, is almost break down the focus into functions of the council that have been mentioned tonight. So, for example, the initiatives that are being considered through planning, so through the service director of planning and the manager of planning. We've got procurement, and we've also got the waste and recycling. We could almost gather some work behind the scenes and arrange for those relevant officers to come with regards to those areas. That will give members clarity on what is happening within each of those areas. And I think then from our point of view and working with the portfolio holder, it's then looking at initiatives and ways forward with regards to education, working with schools, businesses, and looking at some of the initiatives. For example, I know we've had some discussion about the tree planting. That's just one small step, but there are different things that are good practice and different authorities have been undertaking across the country that we could maybe look at to see whether there's anything financially viable for Cabinet to consider to be able to continue to raise awareness of climate change and add some focus to what we're doing. It's just an idea, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, again, it definitely, I'd like, I think definitely start looking to bring in other leaders of, various departments within the council.
And we've got the portfolio holder has raised his hand as well, who wants to come in.
Sorry, I keep looking down there. Okay. Yeah, I'll bring you in. Hold on, just that. So I've also remembered we actually in the original discussion we also talked, I think, about Ashfield's school. They got apparently a bit of a thing going with something, and also the youth forum, is it called now? So effectively the younger council sort of group that sort of
we do have a youth forum, Chair.
Yeah, again, obviously this is a big impact for them. It's their future more than it is probably the generation sitting around here. No matter how some of the councillors are actually here, it's probably going to affect them more than anything. And again, it would probably be interesting to see, what they consider as important as well, that the council should be doing a different view on things. Okay, sorry, Dan, in you come.
Thank you very much. It was just very briefly for you, I suppose in reality I may well be just giving Mike and Shane slightly more work here, for which I do apologise, guys, but you've got me on something that I like here, so we're lucky. Big one first, obviously Mike mentioned it, it's for me, myself, obviously, I don't sit as a member of this panel, but I am incredibly intrigued by what you're doing. But I do think planning and the planning department should be a major focus of some of the work that should be undertaken in the next few months. I think it's an area where we could really give ourselves some teeth and look towards reducing the 97% of emissions that don't come from this council. But it's an area that I'll be particularly keen to see interest on. The other one, and this is where the extra work comes in for you, Mike, really. per comms and the public facing elements of everything. Obviously, we talked about the schools and the business, and it's going to be incredibly important to interact with them and to have more creative initiatives and think a bit outside the box and things that we can do for them. So one of the things that I would like to point you all towards is the concept of the change from city to city, but obviously vegetarianism, veganism is a very growing, would you say, market, and I need people love. Now, I am an avowed carnivore. I make no bones about that, and I leave no bones on the plate either. It all gets devoured, it's gone. But one of the things that has worked really well in a lot of areas for indirectly reducing emissions, reducing obviously the distance that your food travels and everything else, is a meat-free Monday or a meat-free Thursday or whatever. I know the leader, to much of my chagrin and those of my fellow cabinet members, banned meat from our meetings for quite a while. It's not gone down well, but you don't really notice it too much after some time. But something that I think would be a great case study for areas like this is the city of Ghent in Belgium. Now, 10 years ago, you couldn't go there and get anything healthy or fresh. It was all chips with mayo or beef or meats and everything, and they didn't know what this was. They have, I can't remember I wouldn't wish to butcher Flemish, so I won't attempt to say the word in the language, but they have a concept around meat-free Thursdays where they reduce the cost of vegetarian and vegan dishes. They encourage them out to people. They served almost as a special buffet once a week in schools, in businesses, everywhere else. And it just raises that awareness for people. And it's just one of the more novel ideas that I don't think we've really considered in Ashfield, but I think could be quite innovative for our area going forward. You know, we do have quite high obesity rates. We're not the healthiest population. That's why this council has a huge drive towards being healthier, cleaner, greener. So it's just one of the ideas that I've picked up on in my own research that I really do think bears looking at. It's that education, it's informing people of other ways of thinking that are out there, and it opens their eyes to them. If it's in a school, we can open their eyes from a young age. Might be slightly different if we start talking about trying to swap the bacon butties down at the depot for a cauliflower sandwich. I admit that won't go down well, but it's about that education. So it's just an idea that I would potentially like the committee to consider, is have a look at some of these cities, have a look at their own work that they've done, and I would particularly recommend, again, as a prime example of somewhere that loved the meat, wasn't healthy, and have really made that change. Sorry, I did waffle a bit with that, but it's an idea that I think warrants consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, she definitely did waffle, but hopefully it's a nice vegetarian potato waffle in that one. So, yeah, no, I mean, it's actually an interesting thing that you bring that up. I mean, like, again, I have on business traveled to Belgium and Denmark and the Scandinavian areas, and yes, vegetables and things are stuff that's outside in the ground. They do have very, very meat-based diets, and that's in fairly recent years. That's probably in the past 5 years that I've seen that going out there. So you go out for a meal at night at the hotel or one of the restaurants. It's actually really hard to find anything that's vegetarian on the diets, and if they've started to look at changing that around, that's quite interesting. Again, I must admit, I'm not a devout carnivore, but I do like my meat. But my girlfriend have actually recently, again, trying to be having like a one meal a week where it is basically a vegetarian meal. And to be perfectly honest, the meals are improving. We don't really miss it that much. You know, maybe not the best. You know, I probably will never go vegan, but you know, vegetarian sort of stuff, you know, it is fine, and maybe that is the sort of thing that we start helping, because again, I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but they say, you know, it's something like 3 or 4 times the amount of land area to get a pound of beef compared to a pound of vegetables and the rest of it, or, you know, the equivalent. You know, and all the outgassing, unfortunately, that various animals and that perform, which is not particularly good for the ozone there, and all that sort of stuff. Again, you know, the impact of us unfortunately eating far more meat than you have. Because again, when I did look into this, it's probably not going to come out too well on camera, but the amount of meat that we should actually be consuming that is healthy for our bodies is that big. Yeah. Now, I haven't got big hands, by the way, so it's quite a small amount. You know, we're only talking like that thick as well. You know, it's a very small amount. And to be
I'm
perfectly
sorry,
honest,
Chair. Lynn's not looking very impressed.
but it is a very small amount. Now, you know, sometimes I think people find it a bit odd, but sometimes I like fish fingers for breakfast. So that's basically more than my meat allowance used up just for my breakfast, let alone, you know, sort of lunch and evening meals. And I do like my steak baked from Greg. So, you know, I mean, that is another consideration of, you know, how can we lead on that? Now, again, I don't want to enforce this onto council workers, but it would be interesting leading them down the path of giving them an option at some point. Because again, my workplace, if we're actually back in our offices, actually has a free fruit Wednesday. If you're in the offices and you're there, you can walk down into the restaurants or whatever it is, or they have stuff to, if there's no restaurants actually at the site, they'll actually bring it in. So I have seen it, Ian. They'll bring it in and they'll have a great big, you know, fruit sort of basket for people to take whatever they want. And if it runs out next week, they order more. You know, and they're very much encouraging that, and that is quite nice, especially when I used to go around multiple sites and used to go on Wednesdays for some reason, just so I can get some, you know, free fruit, because I do like my apples. So, you know, I mean, again, that does sound like a good concept that actually I'm forgetting, that, you know, maybe one thing that we could actually sort of remark as something. Ian.
We've got Ian that wants to come back, Chair,
Yes,
briefly.
I agree with all that. I think we could certainly, there's an easy hit there through our comms team to maybe up the numbers of what internally on the internet, the message of the day, which, for example, we've also previously had something which is a little tool where you can check your own carbon footprint. So you can go on, so we roll that out to the officers. We can certainly have that on the website for people to just see how much carbon they themselves are responsible for. And it's quite easily rolled out. We've got a presentation waiting in the wings that was due to be rolled, is to be rolled out ideally to officers, but it can be easily taken to schools if, you know, like placing communities, maybe we'll do school visits and the like. It can be replicated, hopefully short and interesting, lots of pictures, which help get buy-in from you know, the youngsters who are already very keen and committed to this. It'll give them a commitment, and still, you know, their resolve will be even stronger, and will hopefully demonstrate to them that we are with them on this for the duration to make it a better planet for the future. So there's a lot. So comms, as I said earlier, I think the link is through the comms, whether it's to businesses, to schools, to employees and officers. That's a way of trickling out to get to everybody within Ashfield, which will have the cumulative effect will be biggest.
Actually, it's something else that's just occurred across my mind. I think this comes within your remit, Ian, is on car parking. Because again, I'm parish council, and we had a discussion there earlier on this week regarding putting charging points in. Because obviously, again, you know, electric cars are supposed to be a better alternative. Again, there are some bad points about it. You know, the actual sort of refining of, you know, the materials, particularly to go into batteries, are not particularly good for the environment. Again, hopefully we can improve that as time goes on with that sort of stuff. But, you know, it's probably better than digging oil out of the ground and burning it. So my question comes in on that. So we've been approached by a company that's going to provide effectively almost like free charging points within the parish car parking, which is actually shared with Ashfield. Now, I know Ashfield have done some work on this with grants. So again, how far are we still now looking to go with that across all of our car parks? I mean, and obviously you wanted to come in anyway, so please feel free to use it. This for both.
Yeah, my remit on car parks is we kind of administer people parking. In terms of the strategy, that's not my remit. However, I think basically car parks, along with all our other parking facilities, this is part of a bigger picture in terms of some demand and supply. There are companies who will do it for FOC, but they'll do that because they will make some money out of it ultimately. So the decision is whether we decide to invest in it ourselves so we get the maximum benefit from the business case. And so it's something which we definitely will be looking at in more detail. This probably also comes along with the likes of our depot, where we've got a bidding currently almost finish off the depot solar PV, with a view to then, as part of we'll put back to members, is to invest in a study by specialists to look at the fleet with the SPV, battery storage and car charging or fleet charging, because I think we need kind of to get a future idea of the demand. So if we're going to go to electric fleet, can the SPV generate electricity with battery storage to charge them over the night to do that? So at the moment it's a little bit of an unknown, because the electric vehicles are still in their infancy. They are increasing in numbers, but it's just kind of making that meeting demand when it comes, but also tying in with a business case that is beneficial to everybody, including keeping the council budget sustainable. So we could easily jump into contract with these companies. However, we'd like to review whether, if we invest in it ourselves, can we make and help sustain the council to benefit people in future by doing that directly.
Okay, yeah, I mean, actually, that is again another good point. About the solar panel, the photovoltaics and the rest of it, and having the battery storage locally. Because again, this is I think something that's been pointed out by a few motoring groups, that if everybody starts going to electric cars, have we actually got the infrastructure that can cope with that kind of demand? And again, how much have we looked into that with the work obviously that you're doing with that, to make sure that we can actually keep our supply? Sorry, Ian, yeah.
Yeah, I think at the moment is as part of the Rescue Fleet Officers Group, we had they have kind of guest presenters and I think representatives from the electricity grid. Is it? I forget the name, slipped my mind. But effectively, they are one of the big questions was with electric vehicles: can the infrastructure cope? And effectively, I think they are spending billions on the infrastructure. So they are Western Power. They are committed to ensuring that the fundamental infrastructure is there to meet the new demand. If electric vehicles rather than hydrogen is going to be the way forward. I mean, as part of our, for information, part of our business cases with SPV is we have to consult with the DNO, the district network operator, to establish whether we can export any excess electricity to the grid. And potentially, if we can't and we want to, then there may be a big cost to that. Alternatively, we just forego that excess electricity. But I think the reassurance is that it was one of my I was skeptical initially, but Western Power have said that all the networks are gearing up to be able to deliver the infrastructure such that if everybody on their house has a charging point or we charge from a lamppost, that the infrastructure is there to deliver that. And then obviously with the car demand linked to that, the charging points will sit in the middle there. I think obviously the likes of Oxford, I think City Council are very high, very far ahead with on-street charging, but obviously on-street charging comes with other potential issues of, if you trail a cable from across the pavement, will someone trip over it then hurt themselves? So there's a lot of questions to be answered, but you're quite right, as a starting point is if we can concentrate on the areas, maybe our own car parks, solar carports to the depot, to the main offices, if that can be encouraged, then that's the starting point really. But I think there's quite a lot of numbers to crunch and someone knows at this point in time to know what the future will quite look like in terms of that.
Yeah, because again, this is again not particularly a question to you, Ian, on this, but maybe also Councillor Rostons. But obviously, a lot of our roads around Ashfield are very old, and consequently not particularly suited to on-street car parking in the first place. I mean, I have numbers of roads in my ward where you know, the horror of having people charging from local lampposts is just horrific, because they can barely park on the road at all. You know, they're on the pavements, because if they're parked on the road, you have two lines of cars. Literally, you can't even walk down the middle. So goodness knows how the cars get in and out. You know, it's a great big sort of shuffle of butterflies, if anyone's old enough to remember that sitcom, where you know, the whole family, you know, for the mother to get out, you know, the sons and that used to still have to drive out, and you see her drive off, and then he'll drive back up again. I mean, you literally have streets of that. So, and again, you know, just the infrastructure of us sort of holding on to that would be interesting. Obviously, that would again have to be a collaboration with, you know, the county council. The whole thing would have to be tied up from that point of view. I mean, because again, you say Western Power are looking at the distribution network. Are you also talking in the generations? Because again, obviously from the central government, we've had a lot of flip-flopping backwards and forwards of where we're going to be getting our energy from in the future as well. So again, you know, it's local security of supply. Luckily, we've got Rushcliffe, but again, you know, we could get cut off with the other side of Nottingham.
Yeah, I think I don't know too much about it, but certainly I know some councils are investing in solar farms all over the country. So like gas, you know, there are shippers and suppliers. So I think certainly linked to the government's 10-point plan, obviously there's a big emphasis on the electricity generated from the likes of wind power, and then it's for us to decide whether it's banks for bucks in terms of the likes of SPV, because if we put an SPV on the majority every building, then that would generate probably a large proportion of the electricity demand, and similarly the likes of ground source heat pumps. Is that the future? But hydrogen is the unknown, which is on the cusp of coming in. But I think fundamentally we're probably relying on the central government to ensure supply constantly wherever we live. However, then it's probably more local level decision as to the business case and what we can do for, you know, our local residents to boost that.
Right. Okay. I think we're starting to get to the end of this today. Is there any other topic that any of the other members want to bring up in this case, or do we think we've had enough of information from the various points? I'm seeing some nodding heads. Councillor Phil Rasmus would like to come in.
Just one really quick one. Ian touched on early doors that how much energy we're saving from the fact that we're not travelling to work to and from. I'm just wondering if it's looking like it's going to be a permanent thing that the likes of Mike and Lynn just get to sit out the window and look at the back gardens rather than coming into the offices. Is it going to be a permanent thing, or is it going to be phased return when all that comes back? Or I just wanted to know what the bigger picture is of that.
I mean, this is an interesting thing. I suppose that the CEO has to come in and answer that on the policy, because, you know, it's not for any of the officers here. I mean, again, just reiterate, obviously, I think most of you know I work for a very large organization called Oracle, multinational IT company. At the moment, none of our offices are open, and they have actually been, you know, announcing that some of those offices won't reopen. Yeah. You know, and there's a lot of companies, from what I've read in the press and that are saying, well, actually, we thought it wasn't going to work, but funny enough, it's not as bad as we thought. You know, it's almost been a good experiment.
My wife's been the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So there could be, I don't know who I was talking to about this. There's definitely somebody from this council that there has been a thought about, you know, are we actually maybe going to look to this, you know, semi-permanent, you know, certain roles can, you know, I mean, we've already started working towards agile already in the digital services transformation, where there's a lot of officers now, I can tell you this from some of the reports I've had this week, where the people working on the housing have only come into the offices or depots, effectively, it's not even the offices, but to the depots every 3 or 4 days now, rather than multiple times a day. So you can see the impact automatically that's happening like that. And again, we've got other officers who are actually with, you know, our residents again, there's no need for them to have a desk space. Good doing that. And obviously, Ian, this is probably right in your ballpark about potential savings with the buildings. Ian?
Yes.
Nothing.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yep.
So I think that is a big thing. Certainly, speaking from a personal perspective, I've got teams across the council and those that can work from home or working from home full time, especially those that are travelling a long, long way. I think that there's pros and cons of agile. I think there'll be a mix between the two going forward. And certainly this will also influence other decisions. So, for example, HR are looking into potential tax exemptions and benefits from encouraging electric vehicles. At the same time, other councils look at the like of electric pool cars instead of. However, if you're going from home to site at home, then you don't come to work, so you don't need the pool cars. So all these things have the ripple effect on other factors. So certainly, from my personal point of view, I think agile in whatever form is here to stay. How that looks like in terms of its guise, and certainly with if we can do certain ratios of people in the office, people working from home, to making sure that we hit the health and wellbeing agenda, and we get to see people and have a bit of an office banter at the same time. Certainly, there's a lot of scope there, and we will. It'll be interesting then, because come the end of March, we'll have the stats, for example, on the mileage on this financial year versus the last 5 years. So I'm expecting a massive reduction in that, and commuting, which will benefit everybody massively.
Right, cool. Do you want to come back at all, Phil, or are you happy with that? Okay, cool. Right. So I do think that sort of brings us to the end then. So the interesting point is there seems to be an awful lot of things happening after March for a start. So obviously there is, I don't know even if it's worth I don't know, it's too late. I would like to see another working group with maybe one of these other areas like planning or waste or procurement. I think the procurement could be quite an interesting one for us to bring in on, because again, just to fill the councillors in that couldn't make the working group meeting, one of the things that was brought up about the procurement is actually, and again, it was touched on by Ian, but the point of, can we almost mandate certain levels of green from our subcontractors? Obviously, there could be various legal implications on that and the rest of it, because it could have issues with maybe some of the smaller contractors who maybe can't. It's going to be difficult for them to sort of do that. Have seen you, Ian. Don't worry. So I definitely think perhaps we could have a working group in with that, one of those areas, if that could be arranged. Mike, is everybody up for trying to get to that again?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. From our point of view, we can look to be getting another working group in. We'll work with yourself and the chair, and then contact all of the members to give them due notice. I think the idea of focusing in on one or two of what the of council services such as procurement and planning is a real good focused area, because that will help inform both us and members, but also may help inform the direction of any potential further actions or further information.
Okay, I mean, the areas I've got down: planning, procurement, waste and recycling, then effectively almost like two external topics, which are the schools and youth forum and the veganism, vegetarian concepts and the rest of it. So they're 5 that I've got. So anybody else got any other topics maybe for the work group, mainly focusing on the council, that want to maybe throw Mike's way as a possible? That's a no. Okay, Ian, you wanted to come back in. I want to do that before I forget.
Okay, thank you. It was just a very quick one on the procurement. The council is joined. There's something called the Social Value Portal. I don't know whether you're aware of it, but it's a new measure of community benefits and sustainability in procurement. And the idea is, I think the council is signing up to it, or has signed up to it, and that includes, I say, community benefits, such as things like traineeships, apprenticeships. It puts pounds to social benefit. I think within that is a carbon type calculator. So this is a methodology to measure consistently, and then the idea is hopefully we can embed that into through the procurement side of it. It's not my area, but we are certainly pushing that hard. If we can incorporate that into that, then that's a measure, and then it becomes a bigger decision whether, because clearly the bigger companies, they have got bigger sections who can tick all the boxes, and wherever the smaller companies don't, but it's kind of helping the SMEs to kind of tick the boxes so that we can help them and they can still not excluded from works. At the same time, they still need to come up to the mark to make sure they are having their own green credentials. And the very last thing I'll say, Councillor, on this is that obviously in terms of carbon footprints, it's a very, very almost impossible thing to measure at the moment, because you might be a local company, however, you might import the raw materials for your product from Alaska. So it's the embedded carbon within the things, and also then you're travelling. But I think fundamentally on our works, we ask for evidence of their climate change credentials. Have they got a climate change and carbon reductions plan, and what are they doing to work against that, to monitor it and convince us they're going in the right direction? So we certainly, as a section, are delivering that at the moment. It's just a case of probably widening this out to ensure the council, all procurement exercises, make sure we tick these boxes.
Okay, so Mike, you'll probably remember this because I can never remember the next. When's the next scrutiny panel be scheduled for?
We've got one in March, the 8th of March.
It's the 18th of March.
18th of March.
So is that too soon for any of these reports and that are coming out? Is it the end of March? It is too soon, is it?
Sorry, you're unmuted, Ian. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say your call, but in terms of the climate change draft strategy and action plan, that's due the end of April. So by all means, have another meeting, but if that can, so the meeting after that is when we'll hopefully be able to present that and discuss that in more detail.
Yeah. So again, obviously, if it would be possible, maybe to me, there's almost no point having the actual panel meet if we've not got one of those formal sort of things to actually then for us to consider beforehand, and again, obviously giving us enough time to do that.
We've got, Chair, so there's opportunity to hold another information finding working group with planning, procurement, etc. I think that those kind of things we can do. I think then kind of along the way you can then as a group of members make a decision with regards to a future meeting whether you have enough information to hold the next meeting. What I would suggest is we wait to see what information we can gather from the various areas and the next working group, and then you make a decision from that point on. I think that's probably the most efficient route to go down.
Okay, that sounds good enough to me. So
me and Shane and Lynn will be in touch with regards to some potential dates. We'll obviously work around the availability of the key area officers as well. I think we're acutely aware of the pressures at the moment in certain areas, particularly during COVID and maintaining current services. So I think obviously there are some sensitivities there, and we'll work around officers and work with the service directors to ensure that we're not placing undue pressure in areas of the council that have other priorities such as keeping essential services going. So yeah, we'll be in touch, Chair, and we'll work with yourself and the Vice Chair and get a date out for the working group.
Right, obviously, I'd like a good attendance on this. Obviously, it's going to have to be during the day. There's no way that we can get around that. Is there any particular day that's a really bad option for anybody? Monday, Tuesday, whatever it is. That's got a real problem with this. If we could try and maybe go around that. Sorry, Councillor Dow-Grounds, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm volunteering at the vaccine centre Mondays, Tuesdays, Fridays and Thursdays. So Wednesdays
is probably the better day if possible. Yeah. Okay. Again, for me, just Thursday mornings is probably going to be the biggest issue. for me, because I think we tend to try to do them in the morning, so Thursday would be a bit of an issue for me as well. So Wednesday looks like a good day so far. So anybody who would violently object against trying to do a Wednesday? No? Okay. Yeah, we'll try to do it if we can, Lynn, then try and schedule it on a Wednesday for that working group. That looks pretty good. Right. Mike, any further summary you want to make before I
No, Chair. I think we've kind of covered everything we can tonight from the information we had. I think the next step is obviously those service areas and that information finding, and then working with the portfolio holder on any potential and up and coming best practice initiatives that are going on elsewhere.
Okay, just one thing. Obviously, I've had Shane send me a copy of that CFGS report. I don't know if he's actually sent it out to all of you. Would anybody else want to do it? It's a 32-page document on recommendations. Sort of likely. Okay, Daniel looks like he could do with a copy. Shane, if you could do that. Anybody else? Dale looks like he wants a copy. Everybody else seems sensible and has actually got a life. Not to be reading a 32-page document.
In the interest, Chair, of keeping it green, Shane will email a copy out rather than.
That's very good. Yes, definitely. Remember, I still seem to be getting these things through my letterbox. I'm looking at you, Lynn. I've told you several times before.
It's not Lynn.
Okay, whoever it is, can we get a message to them? I do not want them. I have this rather expensive device here that I got down at the side of me that I use instead. I only picked this up because I just wanted to look at one page, but I would have used that anyway. But I have recommended it, and I would hope, my colleagues as well would prefer not to be getting dead paper copy. I mean, again, Ian actually pointed out one of the nice things that because people haven't been in the offices, we have vastly reduced down on paper. And that, to be perfectly honest, people do not. Okay, I understand. Dave will be getting off in a second. Having paper is a horrific thing for the environment. The amount of trees obviously cut down, and the bleaching and the energy required for these things is horrible. So there we go. Anyway, unless there's anybody else with a desperate comment, I shall call this panel to a close, and thank you for your attendance, and thank you for everybody else on the internet, all 4 of you watching. Okay. See ya.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.